From heartbreak to happiness, second chances, how a 40-year-old single dad found love again, the story of a life reborn. At 40 years old, I found myself standing on the edge of a precipice, staring down into the abyss of a life I never imagined would be mine. The house was quiet, the kids finally asleep after hours of bedtime stories and gentle coaxing. Yet I was wide awake, consumed by a whirlpool of emotions that wouldn't let me rest. My wife, my partner, the woman I'd built a life with, was cheating on me. It felt like a betrayal so deep it nearly split me in two. I had thought we were happy, or at least content. But now that illusion was shattered. When I first discovered her infidelity, it was like a dagger to the heart. I remember confronting her, my voice trembling with disbelief. She didn't deny it. That hurt the most, her quiet resignation, as if she had already accepted the consequences long before I even knew. There was no fiery argument, no passionate plea for forgiveness. Just a cold, stark reality that our marriage was over. The papers were filed, and I found myself suddenly thrust into the world of divorce, a place I had never thought I'd be. Each day became a struggle to get out of bed, to put on a brave face for my 3 kids, my beautiful, innocent children who had no idea their world was about to change forever. The mornings were the hardest. I'd wake up, and for a few blissful moments I'd forget the nightmare I was living. But then reality would come crashing back down, and the weight of it all would pin me to the mattress. I cried, more than I'd ever cried in my life. I cried in the shower so the kids wouldn't see, cried in the car on the way to work, and cried in the dark, empty house after they were asleep. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my marriage. I was mourning the loss of the future I had envisioned, the family I had worked so hard to build, and the love I thought was unbreakable. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror one evening, staring at the man looking back at me. He was a stranger, his eyes hollow, his face drawn and tired. I didn't recognize myself. This wasn't the man I wanted to be, but I didn't know how to be anything else. The loneliness was suffocating. I had no idea how I was going to move forward. Who would want me now? A 40-year-old man with 3 young children and not much money to his name? The divorce was draining me emotionally, physically, and financially. My self-esteem, once solid, was now in tatters. But through it all, I had to keep going for my kids. I had to be their rock, even when I felt like I was crumbling inside. They were my light in the darkness, the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. I'd read them bedtime stories, their laughter the only sound that could pierce through the fog of my despair. I pretended to be strong, but the truth was, I was scared. Scared of the future, of being alone, of not being enough for them. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received a message from one of my closest friends at work. Susan was one of those people who seemed to know everyone and had a knack for setting people up, though I never really paid much attention to her matchmaking endeavors. But now, in the midst of my misery, she reached out with a simple suggestion that would change my life. "Hey, I know you're going through a rough time," she said, her voice gentle but with a hint of that persistent optimism she was known for. "But I want to introduce you to someone. She's a colleague of mine. Her name is Emily. She's been single for years, but she's wonderful. I think you two might hit it off." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Me? Dating? It felt like a cruel joke. I was still reeling from the end of my marriage, still raw from the betrayal. The thought of trying to start over was daunting, to say the least, but Susan was insistent, and there was something in her tone that made me pause. She wasn't just trying to fix me up with someone. She genuinely believed that this might help me heal. "I don't know, Susan," I said, running a hand through my hair. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this. I don't even know if I'll ever be ready." "You don't have to jump into anything," she reassured me. "Just meet her. Have lunch with us. No pressure, no expectations. Just see how you feel." I hesitated, the fear and insecurity gnawing at me. But then I thought about the future, about how I didn't want to spend the rest of my life alone, wallowing in bitterness and regret. Maybe, just maybe, meeting someone new could be the first step in moving on. And so, with a shaky breath, I agreed. The lunch was scheduled for the following Friday. The days leading up to it were a strange mix of anxiety and cautious hope. I knew I couldn't expect much. I wasn't in any shape to be a catch, but a small part of me was curious. Who was this woman who had sworn off dating for nearly 8 years? What kind of person was she? And more importantly, why would she want to meet someone like me? When Friday finally arrived, I found myself standing outside the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar sounds of the city buzzed around me, but I felt detached, like I was moving through a fog. I wasn't sure if I could do this. The thought of putting myself out there again, of risking more heartache, was terrifying. But then I remembered Susan's words, no pressure, no expectations. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked inside. The restaurant was bustling with the lunchtime crowd, a lively cacophony of clinking cutlery, murmured conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter. I scanned the room, my eyes searching for a familiar face among the sea of strangers. It didn't take long to spot Susan, her bright smile and energetic wave standing out like a beacon amidst the throng of diners. She was seated at a large table near the back, surrounded by a group of our colleagues, and there, beside her, was Emily. My first thought was that Susan had been right. Emily was gorgeous. She had a natural beauty that didn't need any embellishments. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup, just enough to accentuate her bright blue eyes. But what struck me most was her smile, warm, genuine, and slightly nervous, as if she was just as unsure about this meeting as I was. I felt a lump form in my throat as I approached the table. What was I doing here? I was a mess, a broken man trying to piece his life back together. How could I even think of bringing someone else into this chaos? But then, Susan caught my eye and gave me an encouraging nod, as if to say, "You've got this." I mustered up a smile and took the empty seat next to Emily. "Hi, I'm Emily," she said, her voice soft but steady. She extended her hand and I shook it, feeling the warmth of her touch. "Hi, I hesitated for a moment, almost forgetting my own name in the haze of nerves. "I'm Tom." There was an awkward pause, the kind that usually follows a forced introduction. But then, Susan, always the social butterfly, jumped in, steering the conversation towards safer, more neutral topics. We talked about work, shared funny stories from the office, and laughed about the quirks of our various colleagues. Slowly, the initial tension began to ease, and I found myself relaxing, enjoying the company. But through it all, I couldn't help but steal glances at Emily. There was something about her that intrigued me, something beyond her looks. She had a quiet confidence, a sense of calm that was almost contagious. And yet there was a hint of vulnerability too, as if she had her own scars that she was trying to hide. As the lunch wore on, the group started to dwindle, with people heading back to work one by one. Eventually, it was just the three of us, Susan, Emily, and me. And I could tell Susan was itching to leave us alone, to let us have some time to ourselves, but she was waiting for the right moment. That moment came when Emily asked me about my kids. I told her about them, how my oldest, Jake, was obsessed with dinosaurs, how my middle child, Sophie, loved to paint, and how my youngest, Lily, was already a master at causing mischief. As I spoke, I could see Emily's eyes light up with genuine interest. "I'd love to meet them someday," she said, almost shyly. My heart skipped a beat. Was she serious? Could she really be interested in me, baggage and all? I didn't know how to respond. Before I could say anything, Susan suddenly stood up, a sly smile on her face. "Well, I've got to get back to the office," she said, grabbing her purse. "You two should stay and chat some more, no rush." I shot her a grateful look and she winked at me before heading out the door, leaving Emily and me alone. There was another brief moment of awkward silence, but it quickly passed. We started talking again, this time more freely, without the safety net of our mutual friend. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. Emily told me about her decision to swear off dating after a string of bad relationships, how she had focused on her career and her hobbies instead, and how she never thought she'd meet someone who could change her mind. "I guess I just got tired of being disappointed," she admitted, stirring her drink absently. "But then Susan told me about you and I thought, why not give it one more chance?" I was stunned. Here was this amazing woman, beautiful and kind, who could have had anyone she wanted, and yet she was giving me with all my baggage, a chance. It was both humbling and terrifying. "I feel the same way," I confessed. "After everything that's happened, I never thought I'd be here sitting with someone like you." She smiled, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something more in her eyes, something that made my heart beat faster. It was a glimmer of hope, a sign that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for me after all. The hours flew by, and before we knew it, the lunch crowd had thinned out, leaving the restaurant quiet and intimate. Our conversation had taken on a life of its own, flowing naturally from one topic to another. I felt like I had known Emily for years, not hours. Eventually, we realized it was time to go. We both had to get back to work, but neither of us wanted to end the afternoon on such a mundane note. "Would you like to go out again?" I asked, trying to keep the nerves out of my voice. "I'd love that," she replied, her smile widening. We exchanged numbers, and as I left the restaurant, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for me to find happiness, even after everything that had happened. The rest of the week passed in a blur. Each evening after the kids were in bed, I found myself eagerly waiting for the phone to ring. And it did, without fail. Emily and I talked every night, sometimes for hours, about anything and everything. It felt so natural, so easy, as if we had known each other forever. The connection between us was undeniable, and it only grew stronger with each conversation. We talked about our pasts, our hopes for the future, and our fears. I told her about my divorce, the pain of discovering my wife's infidelity, and the struggles of being a single dad. She listened without judgment, offering only kindness and understanding. It was the first time I had opened up to anyone about what I was going through, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Emily shared her own stories, too, about the heartbreak she had endured, the disappointments that had led her to swear off dating. But she also talked about her passions, her love for painting, her dream of one day traveling the world. With each new detail she revealed, I found myself falling more and more in love with her. By the time our first official date rolled around, it felt like we had already been through a whirlwind romance. I picked her up on Friday evening, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. She looked stunning, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit that highlighted her natural beauty. I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as we walked into the restaurant together. The evening was perfect. We laughed, we talked, and we shared stories over dinner, our connection deepening with every passing moment. It was like something out of a movie, one of those rare, magical nights where everything just falls into place. After dinner, we found ourselves in the bar, waiting for our table to clear. The atmosphere was cozy, with dim lighting and soft music playing in the background. It was the perfect setting for what was about to happen next. I had been waiting for the right moment all night, and as we sat there sipping our drinks, I knew it had finally arrived. I leaned in closer, my heart racing, and kissed her. It wasn't just any kiss. It was the kind of kiss that makes time stand still, that sends shivers down your spine and leaves you breathless. It was the kind of kiss that you never forget, no matter how much time passes. It was a kiss that changed everything. When we finally pulled away, I looked into her eyes and knew, without a doubt, that I was in love with her. "I love you," I whispered, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Emily's eyes widened, and for a moment I was terrified that I had said it too soon, that I had scared her off, but she didn't run. Instead, she smiled, a soft, radiant smile that made my heart swell with joy. She didn't say it back, not then, but she didn't have to. I could see it in her eyes, feel it in the way she held my hand, in the way she leaned into me. I knew it was just a matter of time. As the night went on, the world outside seemed to fade away. It was just the two of us, wrapped in the warmth of our growing love. By the time I dropped her off at her apartment, I was on cloud 9, already counting down the hours until I could see her again. And so, our relationship blossomed. We spent as much time together as we could, balancing our busy lives with the demands of work and, in my case, fatherhood. Emily met my kids, and to my immense relief, they adored her. She had a natural way with them, knowing just how to make them laugh, how to comfort them when they were upset. It was as if she had always been a part of our lives. The weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, the divorce was finalized. I had dreaded that day, feared it would bring back all the pain and sadness I had worked so hard to overcome. But when it finally arrived, something strange happened. I felt a sense of closure, of relief. The past was behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I could see a future that wasn't clouded by doubt and fear. That same day, I proposed to Emily. I hadn't planned it, hadn't even thought about it until the moment I saw her standing there, waiting for me with that same warm, loving smile that had first drawn me to her. Something inside me just clicked, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. We were in a park, taking a leisurely walk, when I suddenly stopped, turned to her, and dropped to one knee. I didn't have a ring, didn't have a rehearsed speech, just a heart full of love and a desperate need to make her mine forever. "Emily," I began, my voice trembling with emotion, "I know this might seem sudden, and maybe it is, but I can't imagine my life without you. You've brought so much joy and love into my world, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Emily's eyes filled with tears, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. I held my breath, praying she would say yes, that she would take this leap of faith with me, and then to my overwhelming relief she nodded, a bright, tearful smile spreading across her face. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." I stood up, pulling her into my arms as we both laughed and cried, the world around us fading away. Nothing else mattered in that moment, just the two of us, and the love that had brought us together. As we walked back to the car, hand in hand, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I had come. Just a few months ago, I had been at the lowest point of my life, convinced that love was a thing of the past, that I would never be happy again. And yet here I was, engaged to the most incredible woman I had ever met, with a future full of promise and hope. The days leading up to our wedding were a whirlwind of excitement, nerves, and planning. We decided to keep things simple, opting for a small, intimate ceremony with just our closest friends and family. It was exactly what we both wanted, a celebration of our love, surrounded by the people who mattered most to us. My kids were over the moon. They had grown to love Emily as much as I did, and the thought of her officially becoming part of our family filled them with joy. Jake even offered to be the ring bearer, while Sophie and Lily insisted on helping with the flowers. It warmed my heart to see how much they embraced Emily, how naturally she fit into our lives. The wedding day arrived faster than I expected, and before I knew it, I was standing at the altar, watching Emily walk down the aisle toward me. She was breathtaking, dressed in a simple white gown that flowed gracefully around her as she moved. Her eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, nothing else existed. It was just the two of us, together in a world that had finally fallen into place. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with laughter, tears, and heartfelt vows. When Emily said, "I do," my heart swelled with a happiness I hadn't thought possible. The past, with all its pain and heartache, faded away, replaced by a future filled with love and hope. As we exchanged rings, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. This was right. This was where I was meant to be. Emily was my second chance, my new beginning, and I was determined to make the most of it. After the ceremony, we celebrated with a small reception at a nearby restaurant. It was a joyful, relaxed affair, filled with good food, music, and dancing. My kids were the life of the party, twirling around the dance floor with Emily, their laughter ringing out like the sweetest music. At one point, Susan, the friend who had introduced us, pulled me aside, a mischievous grin on her face. "See?" she said, nudging me playfully. "I told you it would work out. You just needed to give love a chance." I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "You were right. I don't know what I would have done without you." She winked at me, her smile widening. "Just promise me one thing. Never forget how lucky you are. Not everyone gets a second chance like this." "I won't," I promised, my heart swelling with gratitude. "I won't ever forget." As the night went on, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. It hadn't been easy, far from it. But every step, Every painful twist and turn had led me to Emily, to this new life that I couldn't have even imagined just a year ago. And yet, as perfect as everything seemed, life still had a few surprises left in store for us. One evening, a few weeks after the wedding, Emily and I were sitting on the couch, enjoying a quiet moment together after the kids had gone to bed. We were talking about our plans for the future, where we wanted to travel, how we wanted to spend our weekends, when Emily suddenly grew quiet, a thoughtful look on her face. "Tom," she began, her voice hesitant, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart skipped a beat, a wave of unease washing over me. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. I'm pregnant." For a moment I couldn't process the words. Pregnant? How was that even possible? We had talked about having children, but with 3 kids already, we hadn't been in any rush to expand our family. And yet here she was, telling me that we were going to have a baby. A rush of emotions surged through me, shock, disbelief, and then, slowly but surely, overwhelming joy. We were going to have a baby, a new life, a symbol of our love and commitment to each other. It was unexpected, but it felt right, like the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. I pulled Emily into my arms, laughing and crying all at once. "This is amazing," I whispered, my heart bursting with happiness. "I love you so much." "I love you too," she murmured, resting her head against my chest. "I wasn't sure how you'd react, but I'm so glad you're happy." "Of course I'm happy," I said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "This is the best news I could have ever imagined." The next few months were a whirlwind of preparations as we readied ourselves for the arrival of our new addition. The kids were thrilled at the prospect of having a baby brother or sister, and they eagerly helped us pick out names, decorate the nursery, and shop for baby clothes. Emily's pregnancy brought us even closer together, strengthening our bond in ways I hadn't thought possible. We shared every moment, every milestone, and it only deepened my love for her. Watching her glow with the anticipation of motherhood filled me with a sense of pride and joy that I had never experienced before. And then one crisp autumn morning, our baby girl was born. As I held her in my arms for the first time, I was overwhelmed by a rush of emotions, love, awe, and a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had led me to this moment. She was perfect, a tiny, beautiful miracle, and I knew that my life would never be the same. We named her Grace, a name that symbolized everything she meant to us: hope, love, and the grace of a second chance. Our family was complete, a blend of past and present, of love and loss, of new beginnings and cherished memories. And as I stood there, surrounded by my children and my wife, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, with love, strength, and an unshakable bond. The years that followed were some of the happiest of my life. Watching Grace grow up alongside her older siblings was a joy I couldn't have anticipated. She brought a new energy to our family, a sense of wonder and innocence that reminded us all of the beauty in everyday moments. Emily and I continued to build our life together, nurturing our relationship and our family with love and patience. We faced challenges, of course. Raising 4 kids was no easy task, but we did it together with a sense of partnership and commitment that only grew stronger over time. My ex-wife had moved on as well, finding her own path and establishing a relationship with our kids that was amicable and respectful. We had come to terms with our past, each finding happiness in our own ways. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the power of forgiveness and the possibility of new beginnings. As Grace entered school, I found myself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought me here. The man I had been at 40, broken, lost, and filled with doubt, seemed like a distant memory. In his place was a man who had found love again, who had rebuilt his life from the ashes of his past, and who was grateful for every moment of it. But life, as I had learned, was full of surprises. And just when I thought I had everything figured out, another twist came my way. It was a typical Saturday morning, the house filled with the sounds of laughter and activity as the kids played in the backyard. Emily and I were sitting at the kitchen table, enjoying a rare moment of peace with our coffee, when the phone rang. I answered it, expecting it to be one of the kids' friends or a telemarketer. But the voice on the other end was one I hadn't heard in years, an old college friend, Jack, who I had lost touch with after graduation. "Tom, it's Jack. Long time no see, huh?" His voice was warm, familiar, and filled with a hint of nostalgia. "Jack? Wow, this is a surprise. How've you been?" I replied, a smile spreading across my face as memories of our college days came flooding back. "I've been good, man, really good. Listen, I know this is out of the blue, but I'm in town for a few days and I'd love to catch up. Maybe grab a beer and reminisce about the good old days?" The idea of reconnecting with an old friend was appealing, and I quickly agreed. We made plans to meet up later that evening, and as I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but feel a wave of excitement. That evening, as I headed out to meet Jack, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. It was just a casual reunion, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation that I couldn't quite explain. When I arrived at the bar, I spotted Jack immediately. He hadn't changed much, still the same charismatic, easygoing guy I remembered from college. We embraced, laughing and slapping each other on the back, as if no time had passed at all. We spent the next few hours catching up, sharing stories of our lives, our families, and our careers. Jack was now a successful entrepreneur, running his own tech company, and he seemed genuinely happy with his life. As the night wore on, and the conversation turned to more reflective topics, Jack suddenly leaned in, his expression serious. "Tom, I have to tell you something," he began, his voice low. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately, ever since I heard about your divorce." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Yeah? What about it?" Jack took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "You know, I was there in the background watching everything unfold. I knew what was happening with your wife, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to get involved, and I regret that, Tom. I should have told you." I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "You knew? All this time?" He nodded, his expression filled with regret. "I'm sorry, man. I should have had your back, but I was too caught up in my own life. I hope you can forgive me." The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd always wondered if anyone else had known about my wife's affair, if there had been signs I had missed. And now here was my old friend, admitting that he had known all along. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Anger, betrayal, and sadness swirled within me. But then I looked at Jack's face, at the guilt and regret that had clearly been eating away at him for years. In that moment, I realized that holding on to anger wouldn't do me any good. It wouldn't change the past or make things right. The only way forward was through forgiveness. "It's okay, Jack," I said finally, my voice steady. "It's all in the past now. We both made mistakes, but we're here now, and that's what matters." Jack's shoulders sagged with relief, and he smiled, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thanks, Tom. That means a lot to me." We clinked our glasses together, a silent toast to forgiveness, friendship, and the power of moving forward. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I needed. Jack's confession had reopened old wounds, but it had also given me the opportunity to heal them properly. It was another reminder that life was full of twists and turns, and that the only way to navigate them was with an open heart and an open mind. When I got home, Emily was waiting for me, a curious smile on her face. "How was it?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me. I kissed her forehead, feeling the warmth of her embrace. "It was good, really good. We talked about a lot of things, cleared the air. I'm glad I went." She smiled up at me, her eyes filled with love. "I'm glad too. It's good to reconnect with old friends." As we stood there holding each other, I realized just how lucky I was. My life had taken so many unexpected turns, but each one had led me to this moment, to this woman, to this family. And for that, I would always be grateful. In the end, life is full of surprises, some painful, some joyous. But through it all, love has a way of finding us, even in the darkest of times. And when it does, it's up to us to embrace it, to nurture it, and to hold on to it with everything we have. Because sometimes, the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, love dies because better love is waiting for you just around the corner. So don't give up hope. Keep your heart open, and one day, love will find you again, just as it found me.